Anyone? So what do you want to produce in an economy? Very good. So the first thing that we can talk about is what people like, right? Number one. That is kind of important, right? You have to produce things that people really like or people are willing to buy. Yes.
What resources do you have?
Very good. The second question is that, you might be living in a desert and people might be willing to buy things that are probably not available in that economy, right? So resources are kind of important. So we have to think about the resources. We also have to think about what people like, right? Notice that this is a very systematic process, right? We ask people what they want to, buy. That can give us an idea about what the economy needs to produce. Then at the same time, the economy also need to worry about the resources that the economy has, because sometimes what people wants to buy might not be produced by the economy. So what do you do? Yeah, you're right. So when you have a country where people would like to buy stuff that you cannot produce, what do? You trade with other countries. You produce something that other countries need or want to buy, and you sell them and you buy the things that people of your country wants to buy. Something that we are going to look at in the next chapter. Okay, trade, very important. Okay, so resources, availability of resources, the behavior of the people, like how much they want to buy of something, these are critical issues, right? When you are combining these two ideas, what people want to buy and the availability of resources that we have, we are talking about this very critical idea. The word that I said that are critical, which is this idea of trade-off. Why is there a trade-off? The trade-off is very simple, because if you ask people what they want to buy, they are going to give you a long list of things that they like, right? And you might not be able to produce all of them. Why? Because you have limited availability of resources. So the limited availability of resources really creates the trade-off that you have to satisfy and convince people that, look, these are the things that we can afford, right? This is also true for a family, just like it is true for a country. And these are the things that we cannot afford. Does it make sense? So it's a very fundamental question. What needs to be produced is going to come from two sources: the preference or what people want to buy and the availability of resources. Okay? So what we're going to do in the next chapter is that we are going to formalize this idea of trade-off. Trade-off is a very critical idea. And we're going to bring a definition called opportunity cost, which is at the heart of any economics course. There is an informal definition of opportunity cost in the slide, so let's read that. Opportunity cost is the highest value alternatives given up in order to engage in some activity. What does that mean? It means that whenever you are undertaking an economic activity, there are 50,000 different things that you have to give up. When you are sleeping for 1 more hour, there are many things that you could have done in that hour. And economics really does not want to keep track of all the trade-offs. It only keeps track of the maximum trade-off, which is going to be summarized by this idea of opportunity cost. In opportunity cost, you figure out the cost of the best alternative that you are giving up. For example, let's say you are sitting in this classroom for an hour. What would be the opportunity cost of this 1 hour? Sorry? That's a very, I really like that answer for several reasons. Let me start with the fact that whenever I ask this question, there can be multiple answers to this question, because for most of us, the value of an hour could be very different. Depending on what you are doing, that really defines the opportunity cost of that hour. Now, if you think about the alternative, usage of this hour of, sitting in a classroom, one of the best alternative would be to work for for that hour and earn some wage. And that is how we usually place a monetary value whenever we are talking about an opportunity cost. It sounds a little bit, I don't know. Sometimes it doesn't make sense, right? Because when we are in, most of the times we hardly think about the opportunity cost in terms of money, right? Most of the times when you are sitting in your classroom, you are thinking about sleeping for one more hour, or sipping your coffee, having some quiet time. These are probably what we would like to prefer. And it becomes difficult for economists to keep track of all this. So most of the times our opportunity costs are going to be in terms of numbers, some monetary numbers. Okay? So what goods and services that are going to be produced is critical. The second question, although critical, but probably has a very widely accepted straightforward answer. The second question is how. So the thought process is as follows. You have decided based on the behavior of the population, based on the availability of resources, the list of things that you are going to produce. You have already resolved the problem of what, now you are going to figure out the problem of how. So how you are going to be producing something can be summarized by one single word, and that word is technology. And we are going to come to this concept many times in this course. Technology has various interpretations in various disciplines. In economics, technology refers to the way inputs are connected with outputs, which means the technology summarizes what you produce out of the raw materials that you are being used. And we are going to be very formal about this technology in about 4 chapters after exam number 1, okay? Where we are going to talk about production in general. But you understand that how things are going to be produced has to be discussed in the context of various ways you can produce something, right? Imagine you are making shoes. A very basic thing that every economy probably needs. There are so many different ways you can make shoes, right? Isn't that right? There are shoes which are entirely handmade. You have seen that, right? And there are shoes that are completely made by machines. What's the basic difference between a shoe that is made by hand and a shoe that is made by a computer? Anyone?
Cost.
Very good. So which one is more expensive? Handmade ones, right? The same good is a shoe, right? If we ignore the brand and the country from it is coming from, a shoe is just a shoe. But there are various ways of making the same shoe. In one way, you can use more labor and very few amount of machinery, very few amount of technology. In some other case, you can use a lot of technology with a very few amount of labor. So technology and what technology you are choosing are critical in answering the question of how. And in due time, we are going to talk about that. If you ask me, out of the 3 questions that we're going to look at, this is the most critical and difficult question to answer. We first looked at the question of what. We said that, based on survey, based on availability of resources, we most of the times can get a good sense of what the economy wants to produce and can produce. The discussion of technology, as you will see, is fairly mutated in this principal level course, because we do not really want to talk too much about technology because it's a very complicated concept. But from day 1, we are going to say that the third question is fairly complicated. And the question is regarding how the goods are going to be produced. Sorry, I apologize. I should have been going to a different slide. So the third question, I apologize. So that's the third question. So we looked at what, then we looked at how, and the third question is who will receive the goods and services. Please take a moment to look at the question. The question is not trivial. So if I ask you the question, who do you think will get the goods and services that is produced by an economy? How would you answer this question? Anyone, please. This is
consumers or the market.
obviously the buyers are going to be paying for that good, right? But can everyone get the good that are being produced?
Only the people that can afford to buy the goods.
Very good, right? And it's a very simple idea. There is nothing magic about that, right? So, but the idea behind this question is very critical. Generally, we would think that the answer to this question is very straightforward. The answer would be anyone who is willing to pay the price for that good should be able to get that good, right? Simple idea. Is this true? Is this true? Can everyone get the good if they are willing to pay the price for it? Okay. That's a big no, right? Why? Okay, that's also a very critical question, point, right? So I want to clarify that point. So your question raises a very critical issue, and the issue is that what is the basic difference between willingness to buy and being able to buy? We would argue that the difference is huge, right? You might be willing to buy almost anything that looks shiny and comfortable. But whether you are going to be able to buy them is critical, right? Let's ignore this distinction for the time being. In the next chapter, we are going to come back to this. For the time being, we are mainly talking about, let's say you are able to buy those goods, you are able to pay the price. Will you get that? You go to a marketplace, you see the price of a certain product, you are willing to spend the money, will you get the good? Is this true? Can you get everything that you are willing to pay the price for?
Depends the benefit exceeds the cost.
Whenever you are saying that, hey, I am willing to pay the price for this good, you are already assumed to have made that comparison, meaning that the benefit of buying that good already exceeds the cost of buying that good, at least for you. We have already gone past that question. That yes, we have made the marginal cost, marginal benefit comparison. We are also willing to pay the price for that good. Will it always be guaranteed that we will get the good for which we are willing to pay the price for? Somebody raise the hand.
I was going to say, is it because it could be out of stock?
That could be a possibility, right? It might not be available. It might not be produced, right? What else?
There might be like a certain age, like an age on.
Very good. Very good. And we should, from the day one, understand that the allocation of a good, whether a good will be given to you, does not only depend on whether you are willing to pay the price for that good. Are we all clear on that? The purchase of an alcoholic beverage obviously subject to an age limit, right? Yes.
Sometimes it couldn't just be an age, it could be a governmental restriction.
Very good. Another critical issue where we are going to see a very, very important role of the government. So we are going to say that this question, which looks very simple, is not a simple question. Because there can be a lot of restrictions of whether you are allowed to buy a good. Being allowed to buy a good is very critical, right? Even when you are willing to pay the price, most of the illicit goods or illegal goods that are being traded has a very high demand. People are really willing to buy those goods, but they are not allowed to buy those goods. Are we all clear on that? So, legal issue is connected with this third question, but I want to go beyond that. So, we understand that there could be legal restrictions, there could be age-related restrictions, there can be social restrictions that prevents you from buying that good. But the question that we are looking at goes beyond that. It goes beyond our general understanding about the restrictions in the sense that there can be nature of the government, that might also prevent us from buying something. I always run out of time in the introductory chapter. I either take too much time or I take too less time. And I always forget to tell you a story. Storytelling is a very important part of this course because through stories we learn a lot of things. I want to tell you a story about a famine in 1943 that happened in India. The 1943 Indian famine is the largest, is the most devastating, famine that happened in the last 100 years. The reason why the 1943 famine, so it happened in India. India was part of the British colony in 1943. Back then, India was not just India; it was a very large country. Okay, about 10 million people died within a period of 2 years. Okay, although some of you some of you might end up taking a more advanced course where we talk about another famine, a Chinese famine that happened in 1966, which also killed a lot of people, but we don't have really good official statistics on that. We have very good official statistics on the Indian famine, 1943 Indian famine. Are we all familiar with what a famine is? Where people die because they cannot eat and things like that, right? Most of the times when we think about famine, we usually think about famine happening in a situation where there is a drought or some kind of destruction of food production, right? Not enough food being produced, so people die because they don't have food, right? 1943 famine happened in a year when there was bumper food production. Bumper food production means that there was food production exceeding the expectations of the population. Still, 10 million people died. Why? No. It's a much more complex story, but the British also are part of that story. It was during the Second World War. I cannot really go into the entire detail, but the idea was that people had money. They were going to the marketplace, right? There was a lot of food, but they could not buy those because nobody was willing to sell them. Do you understand that? Because everyone was afraid that this is a war time. Everyone was afraid that next year they might not have food production, so everyone was storing up their food. That ended up, creating a situation where a lot of people with a lot of money were not able to buy those foods, and they died. Right? So you see that this question is a critical question. It's a fundamental question. So that's one dimension. The other dimension of why this question is important is because it is going to now take us to a very brief discussion about different kind of economies that we see around the world. Because not all economies are the same, meaning that the role of the government in all countries are not the same. We can broadly divide our economy into two categories. One is what we call centrally planned economies, and the other one is what we call market economies. Centrally planned economies are economies where what, how, and for whom, three questions, are determined by the government. The government determines what is going to be produced, how it is going to be produced, and who is going to get what is produced. You don't believe me? Can a government really determine what you can buy or you cannot buy? Yes, they can. Yes, they can. In China, you really cannot own a house. In Russia, you cannot own a car. At least in the former Russia, you could not own a car. In most of the former socialist countries, the food that you buy on an everyday basis is allocated from the government. Government gives you a card, which is called a ration card, that allocates how much food you can buy in a given week. So it is clear that in some economies, government can make decisions about all these three critical questions. What, for whom, and how. As opposed to the centrally planned economy, we also see another kind of economy called the market economy, where the same three questions, what, for whom, and how, are answered in a marketplace. Meaning that what will be produced is going to be determined by the buyer and the seller in a market. How it is going to be produced is going to be also determined by the buyer and seller. And who will get the goods being produced is also going to be determined by a buyer and a seller. This is fascinating, because at the heart of a market economy lies the concept of a market. And I think we all have fairly decent understanding about what a market is. It's a place where a buyer is matched with a seller. But the nature of market can be many different kinds, as we all know. Some markets can be virtual, some markets can be physical, but it's a place where a buyer and a seller meets, which means that a market is a place where if the buyer wants to buy something, he goes, and if the seller wants to sell something, he also goes, and these two sides of the economy meets with each other and decisions gets made, right? So this is kind of interesting. Now, between a market economy where everything is determined by the market and the centrally planned economy where everything is determined by the government, we will have something called a mixed economy. And most of the country around the world was sort of like a mixed economy, where there are some aspect of the market that determines these three questions and some influence of the government that also determines some of these questions. For example, what do you think US economy is? Is this a market economy or is it a centrally planned economy? It's none, right? Why? Because in USA, you can buy almost everything in the marketplace and then you cannot buy some stuff, right? So it's obviously an example of a mixed economy. And most of the countries around us are mixed economy. Okay. So, a little bit more discussion about the role of these two kind of economies and how they are different. When we talk about the distinction between the centrally planned economy and the market economy, we always talk about these two kind of questions. They are related to efficiency, and I want to spend 1 minute defining what efficiency is. Just like scarcity, trade-off, another key word in our economics is efficiency. Efficiency, in a single sentence, is termed as utilization. When we talk about efficiency, we are talking about utilization. Utilization of what? Utilization of resources. So, any time we are talking about a production decision or a technology decision or how much to produce, we are always interested in understanding the efficiency of those decisions. Why is efficiency of the decision-making process so important? Because our resources are scarce. Scarcity forces us to really seriously think about how efficient our decision-making process is. Efficiency can be divided into two categories. One is what we call a production efficiency, and the other one is called an allocative efficiency. Production efficiency ensures that everything that we produce is produced at the cheapest possible cost. In a chapter after our exam 1, we will see that this production efficiency is achieved by minimizing the cost of production. By minimizing the cost that is necessary to produce something, you achieve production efficiency. And one could argue that production efficiency is probably easier to achieve. You get an idea about how much resources you have, you figure out the various ways of producing that good, and you find out and you choose the one that involves the lowest possible cost. Are we all clear on that? The critical one is the allocative one. Allocative efficiency talks about the efficiency in terms of allocating the goods and services that are being produced in an economy. Okay? Now, this is critical in the sense that when you are producing something by achieving production efficiency, that really does not end your economic sort of journey, right? In order to achieve real efficiency, you also have to make sure that the goods that you have produced is going to the right people. Who are the right people? For whose the marginal benefit is higher than marginal cost. Okay? Because these are the people that you want the goods to be bought from, right? Bought to, right? Or sent to. I apologize. Make sense? Would you really prefer people who really does not like the goods to be able to have those goods? Let's say I am one of those guys whose marginal cost is much higher than the marginal benefit of buying that good. So who am I? Am I liking this good? If the marginal cost for me of buying something is higher than the marginal benefit, I really do not like that good. Do you understand that? And our economics says that that person should not buy that good. Because if we give him that good, we are not going to achieve allocative efficiency. We will achieve allocative efficiency only when the marginal cost of buying that good is exactly equal to the marginal cost. Something that we will also explore in very great detail after exam 1. Okay? In summary, our 3 decisions, what, for whom and how, mainly involves these two different kind of efficiency ideas. Production efficiency and allocative efficiency. When we combine these 2 ideas, production efficiency and allocative efficiency, when we achieve those 2 efficiency, we can say comfortably that all our economic questions have been answered. We have been able to answer what, we have been able to answer how, and we have been able to answer for whom. Okay. How much time do I have? I have like 3 or 4 minutes, right? We finish at 25, right? 7 minutes, okay. Okay, before we move any further, I want to sort of go back to our discussion about this market economy versus centrally planned economy. I think throughout your lifetime you have heard a lot of debates about which economy is good, which economy is bad. When we always think about centrally planned economy, we always think about the old Russia or the current China, and we always think that these are economies that are not that good for various reasons. So there is a common perception among all of us that market economy is good for everyone compared to the centrally planned economy. Now, nothing is perfect in this world. So, we can probably give you, write a list of factors that are bad in a centrally planned economy. To begin with, when the government decides everything for me, I really don't like that. It's a common, general human response that you would be happy if you can make all your own decisions. So there are serious criticisms of the centrally planned economy. Is our market economy free of any kind of criticism? The answer is no. Just like there are problems in the centrally planned economy, our market economy also suffers from some serious problems. One of them, which is fairly well understood but does not get that much attention. So let's try to understand one problem that our market economy regularly creates. And we are going to use a term for that, and we are going to get confused. We're going to say that pollution is something that our market economy produces. And we get confused. I mean, pollution is kind of a general concept, right? Anytime there is a production, pollution takes place. It can take place in a centrally planned economy. It can also take place in a market economy. So why does pollution take place in a market economy? Whenever I'm buying a car, am I only paying the price of the car, or am I also paying the price for the air that my car is polluting? Please think about the question before you answer it. There was a hand raised.
I was going to say, when you're producing something, it costs more to produce things in an environmentally friendly manner which is going to jack up the cost of production, decreasing the production efficiency, which is something that companies don't want to do. But in essentially planned economy, the government probably, depending on what the government's values are, would say produce everything cleanly or not care at all.
That's a very good answer. So, when we are thinking about a market economy, where the buyer and the seller is going to determine the price of a good, would I, as a buyer, be willing to pay the price for the pollution, air pollution? I would say no. I just like my car, and I'm willing to pay as much price for my car. I don't care about the air. Are we all clear on that? The producer, somebody says no. Okay. Now, please share with me the different and alternative views that you have. This is what makes this class so interesting, right? Would a producer be willing to pay the price for the air that the producer is polluting? The answer is again no. Why? Because if the producer wants to always charge the lowest possible price, because as we'll see, competition forces them to do that. So one could argue that whenever we have problems such as a pollution, we need government intervention. Because government is the only person or agent or institution that is going to take care of that. So our market economy is also not free of the problems. Let us conclude our class by looking at 3 problems. Just multiple choice. The first one is there. Okay. So which one is the correct answer? So what goods and services will be exchanged is not a central question. I guess so. I'm going to skip this question. This is kind of straightforward. An example of a centrally planned economy. You all know that the Soviet Union is the answer to that. I want to conclude our class with this one. This one is important for your exam. Okay, so what's the correct answer? I'm really happy that there are a lot of really, good students in this class. The answer is indeed D, right? Let's read the question. Find the best ending of the following sentence. A market economy is an economy in which decisions of the households and the firms interacting in the market determine the allocation of goods, which means that it determines who gets the good and how much the price of that good is, right? So a market economy, so you cannot, okay, so we are done. Have a nice day. I just
Question.
yeah.
Immediately after this class, I take